Hi, I'm Sarah from 7 Makes, and today we're going to be making Scrappy Scrunchies. So these scrunchies are a more sustainable alternative to regular scrunchies in that they're made from scrap fabrics. Any small pieces of fabric that you have lying around, you can make into a really cool scrunchie. What you're going to need is small fabrics, at least 12 centimeters wide, 20 centimeters of elastic, pins, machine needles, sewing machine and thread. Oh, and a safety pin. First of all, we're going to measure them out and make sure that we have at least 12 centimeters width. So we're going to lay them out corners together. This way. There we go. So that's our edge. And then we want to go 12 centimeters. And we'll maybe cut a maximum of 8 or 9 centimeters. So we'll go up 12. That's us. So these are going to make our scrunchie. So we're going to sew them together, right sides together, all the way along, and then that will be there. And then we'll send the next one along there. We're almost making a patchwork out of these. We're going to sew them all together first, and we'll lay them out so that any plain ones are interspersed with a bit of pattern. We do this, and then that, and then this. And you want in total about 60 centimeters by 12 centimeters is the amount of fabric that you want to have. First of all, we're going to piece these together and then we'll get making. This is the joy of having one you prepared earlier. This is a new thing that I find out about Gutermann threads. Instead of having to try and pick the thread out, what you can do is rotate the bottom and the thread just pops out. And then what you can do is use this bottom bit as a lock when you finish with the thread. So open, threads out, and then lock it again if needs be. Okay, so we're just going to use a straight stitch here. And we're going to start, where have they gone? There they are, with our fabrics. See the way this hasn't got a straight edge? So we can either cut it straight or we can just sew it along that straight edge there, so that'll be fine. Okay, so right sides together, nice straight stitch. Is that done? There we go. And then the next bit, right sides together. You can pin these, but if you're comfortable not doing it, that's okay as well. Down. See, you can see it starting to fast. So basically what we're creating here is a 60 centimeter by 12 centimeter strip of fabric, but made up of lots of smaller pieces of scrap fabric. If you don't have 60 centimeters worth, or if you don't have fabrics that are 12 centimeters wide, it's absolutely fine. These are for quite big scrunchies. So this is quite a generous scrunchie. You can make it bigger, or you can make it smaller. You can also change the length of the elastic that we're using. I tend to use 20 centimeters of elastic, which allows for that amount of stretch with it, obviously. In an ideal world, what we would do at this point is get our irons and iron open these seams on the inside. What I'm going to do to skip that is finger press them And then when we fold them, I'm going to put pins along each of these, which will keep it open for the purposes of sewing it all together. So finger pressing is basically, instead of an iron, using your finger to run along the seam. Especially with cotton, works really well to keep it open. Because why iron if you don't have to? We're going to pin it. So first of all, what we want to do is tuck in an end. I'm going to tuck in this end, and that gives us a really nice clean join for when we're joining the scrunchie ends together when it's been put through the elastic. And then we're going to start pinning. So we'll pin together, and let's do one at each seam. So because these are scraps, you might end up with one seam here and one seam there. That's okay. You can either put two in or know that you're just going to be able to hold it flat when you're sewing it. So I'm going to pin just between those guys. And the main thing here is knowing that you're going to be following this line. So what we might do, what's a good idea is, if there's a bit that's above the line that you're going to be sewing, it's nice, trim it. So you don't end up sewing and not actually closing the seam. These have stayed open really nicely, which is good. Some of them will close over. I can open out those seams again. So I'm just opening out the seams here so that when I stitch along, it doesn't create a bulky double bit of fabric, and it keeps it nice and neat. Great. So now we've got it pinned, we're ready to sew. Okay, and this is just a straight stitch. We're going to keep it nice and slow. And I'm going to keep my eye on where this seam is. This is made from scraps, so it's going to be a little bit of different sizes fabrics as well. What you might want to do is cut it nice and straight with your scissors. Just be very careful anywhere you've got pinned that you don't damage your scissors or your rotary blades. But I'm going to eyeball it. Okay, so we're going to start with a couple of back stitches, and then we're going to stitch forward. And as you can see, the needle goes over the pins really nicely because they're perpendicular to the edge of the material. Sometimes you might hit it a little bit, but because they're circular, they're round profile, and so is the needle, it skips off really nicely. So a back stitch at the end as well, which keeps it nice and safe. So all the pins are out and we need to turn it inside out. So you can absolutely turn this by hand, which would be a case of turning it inside out and poking it through and pulling it through all the way. And that's perfectly doable. It is quite time consuming, and I didn't know of any other option until I found out about a turning tool. So basically, it's a tube with another pokey thing. We pop the tube inside, turn the fabric over a little bit. I don't use the pointy end for this, I just use the blunt end. Hold that and then slide the fabric gradually over the tube. Which turns it the right way around. Months of time I could have saved making scrunchies over the past number of years if I'd known about this. Anyway, so now we have the bones of our scrunchie. You might want to iron it at this point, which will make it nice and crisp and get your seams nice and straight. Oh, look. So I've missed a bit just because of the scrap function of it. So I'm going to turn this back and put some more stitches in it so that this bit's working. Let me just check the rest of it while I'm here. So I'll just do a wee back stitch over the bit that I've done. And then bring it in. And then gradually taper it back to the line that I had originally sewn. That means it'll be nice and strong. So same again, hook in. All the extra seams make it a wee bit trickier than normal, but either way. So next thing is elastic. We got our 20 centimeter piece of elastic. Any kind of elastic will do. I wouldn't go much thicker than this, which is probably 6 millimeters, but even thin elastic. So anything you've got lying around or take out of something that's falling apart is absolutely fine. I have a collection of big pins, and this is what I use to feed it through. So I stick the pin through the end of the elastic. If you're using round elastic, you might just want to tie it on. That's absolutely fine. This is my tucked in end. Doesn't really matter what end you start on. Drop it through and then use the pin to feed it all the way through the tube of fabric that you have made. Don't let go of the far end. There you go. And then once you've got them all together, take the pin off, pop the two bits of elastic together and tie them in a knot. This is a really good time to check that this is your preferred size of scrunchie. So the amount of stretch, the amount of wrap around that you like as well. So you can make it a little bit shorter, if needs be a little bit tighter, or you can use a longer piece of elastic if you want to as well. So next what we're going to do is we're going to get the outside seam and we're going to make sure that it is straight, so there's no twists in the scrunchie. All the way around. Just a wee bit fiddly, but it's absolutely fine. There we go. Great, so that's not twisted. Then the next thing we're going to do is make sure that this knot is nowhere near where our crossover is going to be. So I like to just feed it through so it's a good bit away from where my join is. Then I get my raw edge and I tuck it inside the folded edge and make it nice and flat. I would pin this one. Flatten it out again, and then we're just going to sew all the way along here. You might want to use a zigzag stitch or a straight stitch for this, whichever is your preference. This is also where I would put my labels. So I'm going to sew from the very top to the very bottom here, and I will be sewing over the elastic. That's okay. It has enough stretch to keep the scrunchie consistently scrunchy all the way around. Okay, so we're going to start with a little back stitch again, and then with straight stitch. I always like to stop and take the pin out. You might want to use a thread that matches exactly the colour of whatever your turned in edge of fabric is. For this purpose, because we've gone wild with all of the purples, I'm very happy just using the purple thread that I've got in. And a couple of back stitches. And however you cut the thread in your machine, cut it off, give it a little, excuse me, give it a little snip. It's a good time to make sure that your stitch has gone all the way along on this side as well, because sometimes we can mix it. And then, so you can use your snips to clean off any edges, any little raw bits of thread. Make sure your scrunchie is evenly scrunchy all the way around. And there you go. You've made a Scrappy Scrunchie. And a big thank you to the Tackling Textiles Fund from Keep Northern Ireland Beautiful, which allowed all of these videos to happen.